Welcome back. This is episode 3, season 2, episode 3. Right, a lot of numbers, lot of numbers in here, and sometimes I get turned around. But thank you all for being on this journey with us. Sayam and I are having so much fun. We were just reflecting off camera for a second there about some of these interviews happened several months ago, and when we listening to it and doing any kind of post-production, remember the context of that, and I hope you feel the joy we feel when we're talking to these people. We hope you feel like you're sitting in a coffee shop somewhere just listening to us, do the right things about listening and letting people kind of tell what their experiences have been. I mean, albeit around the theme of education and how education can be a place that can thrive. How's it been for you, Segef?
It's been quite the experience. Like you said, I was reflecting, a little bit about that episode and how we filmed it in July of last year.
Yeah. You mean today's episode, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, you just said that episode as if it's some random thing. Okay. Yeah. Filmed it in July.
July
Bahamas.
2024. I end up in Nassau, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all the listeners over there who are probably gonna put our heads on a spike for not saying the Bahamas and not just Bahamas. But I really enjoyed my time there. It really brought back a lot of memories about how Haiti and the place I used to go through were structured. But really insightful experience. And
and that's the thing I hope you get from today's episode. So we had the pleasure of talking to Kimberly Minors, a longtime educator in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I think from this conversation, and to the extent it's somewhat indicative of how people are thinking about some of these same questions that form the theme of this podcast in different national contexts. Both Sayab and I are from the Caribbean and from islands and, from developing countries. So we resonated with this a lot. And I think we resonated even more because we were physically there in the Bahamas, talking to Kimberly Minors. It's a beautiful country, at least the 2 islands we've been to. Welcome to Knowledge Unbound. My name is Brian Dewsbury. We are funded by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. We hope you thoroughly enjoy today's conversation. See you at the end. So what I don't like to do the whole read your resume thing, right? Because this podcast is really about the human story and what your experience has been and how it's impacts the way you think about education. So with that in mind, could you introduce yourself to the audience, and particularly with your history in education?
Absolutely. I am from the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, short name, the Bahamas. So thank you for getting that right. And I've been an educator since I started my training at 16 in the College of the Bahamas. So I trained there, and then I went and I taught for 10 years in the Bahamas government system, which I absolutely love. And I was one of those persons who saw myself as being an educator for the rest of my life. There was no plan B. And I really mean that. I was passionate about education. And then my voice started giving me problems, and the doctor said to me, "You're either going to lose it, or you're going to get out. You have to get out of it if you want to preserve it." And like I said, there was no plan B. So for the 10 years that I taught, I loved every single year of my teaching. And it's unfortunate sometimes when I talk to younger teachers and, "Oh, do you enjoy teaching?" It's almost as if they expect me to expect them to say, "No, I don't really enjoy." I was not that teacher. I was always excited about education, education in the Bahamas as well, because it gave me an opportunity to bring to, and I only taught in the government system. I promised myself that I would never teach in a private system. Sorry, private school teachers, we love you too, you're important. But I felt I was given over to government school kids because I wanted to not just give them, and interesting, Brian, I started off in language arts. So when I went to the College of the Bahamas, I did language arts. So I have an associate's degree in language arts. I am teacher certified, but I also loved math. So my bachelor's degree is actually in mathematics, which I absolutely loved as well. But I wanted to give students more than just the math and the language arts. And I try to bring into my classroom just a sense of your purpose, your identity. I want you to think beyond the knowledge I'm giving you, because the knowledge I'm giving you, you can find it in a book. And these days you can find it In Google. Google is one of my best friends, I
Right.
tell you. So my son and I had a conversation this morning, and I asked him a question, and he didn't have the answer. I said, go and ask Google. So for me, no, knowledge has always been, or schooling, education has always been beyond just the math, the reading, writing, arithmetic,
Right.
the 3 R's, but how do I help my students to think about life and who they are and their purpose. And so I wanted to be teaching forever and kind of bringing that to the students of the Bahamas. And my thing always was too, I didn't want to teach any place else
Yeah.
except the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
So what was the thing inside you that made you decide like it had to be government schools?
Because I was a product of the government school.
Okay.
Unfortunately, now I did a lot of reading when I was a child, and so standard English, because I read a lot, standard English it's not my first language. I'm a Bahamian, so
Right.
dialect is my first
Right,
language. I
right.
can talk dialect with the best of them, but I started reading a lot and developing good skills in standard English. And I went to the public system. People always assume, though, that I went to a private school because my English was standard. And
So was there a
never liked it.
stereotype associated
Absolutely,
with okay.
absolutely.
Does that still exist?
And that still exists.
Okay.
I have a daughter who graduated from a public school, and she actually went into medicine. And she said to me, Mom, one of my professors said today when she went to university, he was surprised that I graduated from a public school. And I wanted, and mind you, it doesn't have to be that way because we do develop good students out of the public school. But I determined that I wanted to be one of those persons who invested in public school kids because people invested in me.
Right.
Often
right.
that's how it happens, right?
Yeah.
You get something from something, and then you want to give back in
Yeah.
the same way to others.
Right. So where was that 10 years? Where was that 10 years located?
Well, fortunately, it was in 3 different schools. I started off.
Why was that fortunate?
Because I got different experiences. No, seriously, I got to teach on the Family Island.
Uh-huh.
New Providence is the capital island,
Okay.
and then we have Grand Bahamas, kind of like the second major island,
Okay,
and then we have a grouping of islands called Family Islands.
Okay, I just want to orient our listeners because I know I didn't realize how many islands
Yep.
the Bahamas. So I think 700,
700 islands,
but
Rocky
19
Cays.
19 are the
Inhabited.
inhabited, right? So I
Yes.
mean, so 19 inhabited islands, still a lot, right?
It is.
So yeah, so when you talk about the family of islands, that's sort of the other 6, 8, 17 or whatever.
Right. Well, I
Okay.
taught in one family island, which
Uh-huh.
was Exuma.
Uh-huh.
That was my first teaching experience. I was green. I had stars in my eyes about the world, but it was a good experience because it was kind of like small town, sleepy town
Uh-huh.
kind of experience. Met some really good foreign teachers there
Yeah.
who taught me how to play bridge, contract bridge, one of the best things that happened to me in Exuma. So that was my first teaching experience, and I loved it. Loved just the laid back atmosphere there. And then I returned to the capital, and I taught in 2 high schools here
Okay. And capital being Nassau.
in Nassau.
Okay.
Yes.
So you said there were some foreigners there. Was
Yeah.
that like did they come specifically to teach or?
They came specifically to teach. Yes, and that's what happens in the Bahamas.
Uh-huh.
Because we always can't staff our schools with locals. We have a lot of foreign teachers come. And back then, that would have been 30-some years ago, a lot of our teachers came from Britain,
Right.
some came from Canada, the U.S. We get a lot from the Caribbean these days.
Okay.
We're getting teachers now from Cuba.
Okay.
Especially to teach things like Spanish because there's some relationship there. But these teachers I'm thinking about in particular were from the UK,
Right.
and I loved it because I got friends who were teaching with me, but then they also taught me how to play bridge, and that was one of the things that I say when I retire. I don't mind doing 2 things in my retirement: teaching a little class somewhere,
Right.
but also playing bridge.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I've been, grappling is a strong word, but just, coming to terms with over the last few years, I've been here in the Bahamas. So as you know, I was just in Abaco and now in Nassau. Is this commonality throughout the Caribbean of being former British colonies and the legacies of being colonized in terms of the systems that they've left and the structure of the schools, structure of the government, and to some extent, who comes here, right, to visit and to visit and to maybe even work sometimes. But then also the the uniqueness of the culture that has evolved from the slaves that were brought here against their will and other migrants and just how that has turned into something uniquely Trinidadian in my case or uniquely Bahamian in your case. But also with that, right, the new issues that evolve with the new migration patterns.
Right.
So I know there's a lot of Haitian immigrants, there's some Jamaican immigrants. Talk to us a little bit about that, but particularly how you saw it, to the extent you saw how it played out in the classroom or in the schools. Or maybe a better way to put that question is the school's responsibility to respond to a different social structure because of the immigration patterns.
Right. So when I was a student in school,
Uh-huh.
it was not unusual for me to see white Brits or white Canadians, and there was no mystery to it. And I'll tell you this, my first subject I taught was language arts. I was inspired by a British teacher who taught me how to love Shakespeare, believe it or not. And I actually wanted to teach language arts because I wanted to teach Shakespeare.
Okay.
And so now,
Hie thee hither.
yes,
I remember that one line.
Oh, she
right?
brought Macbeth to life. I loved literature because of her. So now I'm in the classroom teaching. After going through the College of the Bahamas, then, and I'm dealing with students. Like when I was in Exuma, they were mostly Bahamian students.
Okay.
You didn't get a whole lot of non-Bahamians in Exuma that I taught. When I moved to the capital, there's mixing now of Bahamians and Haitian or kids of Haitian descent.
Okay.
And one of the things I noticed with those kids of Haitian descent that I found very interesting was that oftentimes on report card day, one of my challenges as a public school teacher was getting our parents to understand you are first responsible for your child's education.
Right.
And that's one of the greatest challenges in the public school. Once the child entered the public school, the parents took their hands off the education of their child. Whatever the teacher did was well done as far as they were concerned. And the government or the schools had to force parents to collect report cards by saying, if you don't collect your report card for your child gets sent home. But in the Haitian community with those kids, we always expected to see those Haitian parents coming for their children's report cards. And oftentimes the child is sitting next to the parent and they are translating because the parent can't speak English.
Yeah.
But that is something that I always remember from my teaching days.
Yes.
On report card day, most of the Haitian parents are going to show up for their children. So we do have challenges in our education. I think a lot of it is more perceived than real. I really, really believe that. I think at the core of who we are as Bahamian, I'm generalizing here. I think Bahamians are accepting. I think we're a very accepting culture. I think there's a more hype around the way the relationships actually play out than reality. And as a teacher, nobody really cared. I didn't teach, and I can guarantee you that most Bahamian teachers are the same way. When you're teaching, you're teaching. You're not looking at the last name to say, I'm going to teach to this child who has a more Bahamian last name versus this child.
Right. You don't take a deficit approach.
No,
right.
I don't think we do. Even though there had been a trend, and it may still exist, where some Haitian parents they were changing the last names of children because they didn't want it to be known that my child. If you're a Jean or a Joseph, oftentimes it may be assumed.
Yeah,
that,
but
you're
it's so
Haitian
interesting because, and this is maybe part of the benefits. One of the things I love about not just this podcast, but the privilege to travel and understand the human story just around the world, to be honest, right? Because like in the American context, which I guess I'm an immigrant now, I guess I am an immigrant as well. A lot of the people understand that mostly of the South American immigration, some Caribbean immigration. And what you just described is something that happens a lot, happened, I don't know if it still happens, in California, right? Where Mexican immigrants would anglicize their last name. So Juan became John and Pedro became Peter, right? In order to not highlight, right, that you were this. And so this, it kind of of the same mindset is if being identified in this group comes with a stigma and then denies you certain services or force you to get treated a certain way, then it's best to blend in as much as possible. And I guess the researcher in me just wonders, what does this do for questions around identity, how you see yourself, do you kind of keep that Haitian within you while everybody else calls you Johnson? I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that's a
Right.
a rabbit hole, but
And it is, and it's actually a question I think for them and parents to kind of grapple with, because at the end of the day, as far as I am concerned, and this is the way I raise my children. For instance, I have 3 kids. Really, really pleased that God has blessed me with 3. Wish I had more, Brian. Right? I would have been that old woman who lived in the shoe very, very happily.
my bank account disagrees.
But I am thankful for the kids that I do have. But I do try to teach them that you are who you are, and if you live your life trying to be someone else, it's going to catch up with you and not in a good way. So maybe there's something we need to look around, because, like I said, in education, I tried not just to teach the math and the language arts. I did try to tap in to more of the life skills with my students. And maybe we need to have more conversations around when we are training kids. It's, to helping them to tap into their identities.
Yeah.
It's okay to be who you are.
Right.
Because it's actually, at the end of the day, it's the easiest person to be, is who you are. And just allow us to kind of hone that in ways that may make society more profitable for as far as you were concerned. So maybe we need more conversations around that at an earlier age. Maybe, I know there was a program in some schools called Character Counts. I know it was in some schools that I was in, and didn't delve into it too much, but maybe a part of the Character Count curriculum could be around teaching kids that it's okay to be who you are.
Yeah. So after you left teaching, unfortunately, because of your voice challenges, in what ways were you able to stay connected to education?
Very deliberately, in one sense, because there's something about being around teachers, around students, that really excite me. I'm not jiving you. I get excited when I walk on school campuses, get excited when I train teachers. And so I was a part of different projects with the Ministry of Education where I did train teachers. I was a part of a project with Promethean, for instance, where we brought...
Who's Promethean?
Promethean is an education solution company.
Okay.
And you may have heard of the Promethean board, for instance, that interaction between students and learning on a whiteboard.
And
things like that. But we did a project with the Bahamas Ministry of Education, and I was fortunate enough to get the contract as the local to bring the solution for the Bahamas. And it excited me just to be able to do the training. Then for a time as well, I sold educational software. Because again, it gave me a chance to be in the schools, and this is when education, technology and education was just becoming a thing.
Right.
I was able to be involved in schools in that way. And of course, my kids were in school. So I'll be honest with you, Brian, sometimes the schools were happy when I left. It was like, do not let the door close, slam on you on your way out. But I enjoyed being a part of my children's school, because it kind of connected me to education as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was, one concept about education that I love is sometimes when people think of you as an educator or a teacher, the first thing they think of is, what's the class you teach or what subject you teach. And my argument is, education is everywhere. Every interaction that results in learning, results in growth and possibility. That's education. You have to kind of broaden your mindset outside of credit hours and curriculum. And I'm not to say those things aren't important, but it limits the possibilities that are available to you if you only think of it as that.
100% agree with you. Can I say on that point,
Brian?
Brian?
Yeah, please.
As a parent, and again, one of the things that really saddened me in the Bahamas public school is we couldn't get parents to take ownership of their children's education. And so I would love parents to start thinking of themselves as the first educators for their children. We give a lot of, I don't know the way it is in Trinidad or even in the United States, but we give up so much authority to the school system instead of keeping engaged. So I would love to see a program for parents that say, listen, you are responsible for your child's education, and make sure you're more engaged. Make sure you're more engaged in what's happening in the schools. Make sure it supports the values that you want your children to know. So a class for parents as your child's first educator, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly was blessed in my own life. Like, my parents didn't, complete college degrees, but they probably fall along the lines of some of the parents you described earlier, in that even if, I mean, they understood most, I guess, but maybe not necessarily the technical aspects of my work, but they understood the work had to get done, right? Like, so they were
Amen.
checking in, they were, I mean, if things were
Absolutely.
kind of going left, pull you aside. And, but of course, now my children, I mean, they practically come home to a university, right? I did that as a professor, so I could offer things that I didn't experience. Let's pivot a little bit to, I don't remember all the details of it. So there's a Project 2040 that the Bahamas has developed that is kind of a subset of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And just to summarize a little bit here, a big part of it is to enhance public awareness of the blue economy, right? So Bahamas has all these rich resources. It's beautiful ocean. Even the name Bahamas, I believe, means shallow water. I think Bahamar is what it kind of came from. And just stereotypically, I think most people who, when they think of the Bahamas, what they think of is the beautiful beaches
Sun, sand, and sea.
and the sand. Say that again.
Sun,
Sand, and sea, right?
3 S's.
And I think I read somewhere that to the point where the tourism contributes, I think, 65 cents to every dollar, right, of the local economy.
Right.
So it's a big contributor. But then I also was told that some 67% of Bahamian youth can't swim, right? So
Yeah.
but here's the thing. Okay, I'm saying this in an incredulous way, but I'm actually not surprised, just because, and I don't know the number in Trinidad, but I know that for most, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but swimming wasn't part of the curriculum when I was in school, right? My mom sent us to learn to swim, and I think a lot of people, like, especially in the US, I hate to say it, but you're from the island, obviously you could swim. Well, no, we went to the water. That's not the same thing as being able to swim. So I'm curious to hear your view on this relationship between the Bahamians, the marine resources, what you think they know of it, don't know of it, what are barriers to perhaps a deeper awareness of what these marine resources are bringing and can bring going forward beyond tourism, right? And not even just like in terms of dollars and cents, but just like this is ours, right? There's beauty in here. There's complexity in this environment that needs to be taught and engaged with. Is it in the curriculum? If it's not in the curriculum, is it sort of after school programs? Are there class differences in who accesses? I know access is a broad word, but who really gets excited about being in the ocean? I think you know where I'm going with this. So I do. You can take this however you want.
Unfortunately, 12 years of schooling I had, there was absolutely no information on anything that had to do with our marine. And like you say, most people, even in New Providence, who know how to swim, they went to swim lessons, or they went to schools, and sometimes private schools, where they were taught to swim, or they went to one of those family islands, and during the summer, someone may have thrown them overboard, and they had to sink or swim.
Was that the class?
So that happens as well. So I think the Bahamas is only 51 years old as a nation.
Right, 1973, I believe.
1973, July the 10th. And so we're only 51. So we're still young as a nation, if you really think about it. I mean, I'm just a few years older than the country.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I consider myself young.
Yeah,
yes. So if you think in terms of years and just being new, just being still young, there's a lot of things that need to be developed, where we begin to look now at ourselves as a country, and how do we groom Bahamians to understand what it is that we do have. But you know what I believe, Brian? I believe that there is almost like a deliberate effort by forces unknown for us not to know more about our land and our resources, because the more we know, the more empowered that we are, then the less foreign investment, and I really believe this. We may be less interest in nothing involved with no problem with foreigners. My husband, by the way, is a foreigner, so I have no issues with foreigners in the Bahamas. But I think there needs to be a deliberate effort to Bahamianize even more of our curriculum in terms of what really is this country about. Those 19 islands each have different resources. There are different things about these islands. There are different resources on these islands that we don't know about. I did not travel really, even as a Bahamian, until for me, I was poor growing up. I didn't know about even outer islands until I was much older because in school, I didn't get that this is what your country is about. This is
Yeah.
where I thought that we were a Caribbean country for a
Right.
very long time. We're not in the Caribbean. Did you
Right.
know that?
I
The
know. Yeah.
Bahamas
Well,
is not
I
in the
knew that later
Caribbean.
on. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
knew that much late in my life. Now, culturally, we
Yeah.
identify with the Caribbean,
Right.
and we're
Right.
proud to be a part of the
Yes.
Caribbean. We have the sporting. One of these years, we're going to beat Jamaica in Carifta. So we're sporting.
Is that
We're
is that your fiercest rival
for track and
for track
field.
and field?
We're
Yeah.
on top for swimming. I'm very proud to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that. But there are some things that I did not know about the Bahamas until
Right.
I was an adult, and I was reading these things even online in some instances. So I do believe that there needs to be an overhaul of our curriculum, not by politicians, but by educators who understand, or people. There needs to be more of a broad-based conversation. And I know they attempted it before. I've heard about these initiatives, but people like Aaron Johnson, who's a part of this project to bring more awareness to the ecosystem, they need to contribute more to conversations
Right.
about what is in there in our waters
Yeah.
so that we can appreciate it more. Do you know I learned that one of the most photographed places from space, do you know where that place is? One of the most photographed places?
I'm assuming one of the 19 islands.
One of the 19 islands, the Exumas. And you can Google that. I learned that on Google, actually, that astronauts such as Neil Armstrong love to photograph the waters, the beautiful
Just
clear
because of the
waters,
clarity
just
of it,
because of
yeah.
the clarity of it.
Right.
I never heard that in school. So I do think there needs to be an overhaul of our educational system. Yeah, tourism has carried us well initially out of the gate. Now we need to develop more of those resources.
Yeah.
And need to develop more. You talk about the carbon credits and all the rest of it. I'm not as knowledgeable on that,
Yeah.
but what it speaks to me is that
Right.
there are so many untapped resources in this country that we as locals or residents, and I'm not just saying citizens, but there are
Right.
people who come here and invest in this country, and they take up residency because they love the land.
Right.
That I think there could be more of a deliberate effort to educate us on
Right.
the beyond the sand, sea, and the sun.
Yeah.
Even though we're grateful for that, has helped as well.
I know, man, and I know it's a struggle, and I'm speaking as somebody who comes from a country that does rely some on tourism, maybe not as much as
Right.
Bahamas. I mean, Tobago, I think, was there's two islands, as you know, and Tobago is much more tourism. But tourism is like a catch-22, right? Because on one hand, the economy is the economy, right? I mean, that's what keeps the lights on and keeps the people kind of financially together. But at the same time, almost for it to work, it requires a kind of sterilized codification of what the essence of what the Bahamas is and what it looks like, to the point where I wonder if some of it is even unrecognizable to people who are born and raised here. So you see why it needs to exist, right? Because you get a big cruise ship and they all come on the sand and that then trickles down to a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
But I just wonder, where's that sweet spot between that welcoming aspect to it, but also the investment in local knowledge of what all these things really mean.
There has been some attempt over the past several years at, you call it religious tourism, for instance. Seriously, someone has coined the phrase religious tourism, because I don't know if you know about the Bahamas, but we are considered, and I put it in quotes, a Christian nation because of the way the preamble to our Constitution was written. So there has been attempts to say, you know what, you want to come to a place where if you're a believer and you want to have these big conventions, the Bahamas is a place for it. And there's something in the Bahamas called sports tourism. We recently hosted the World Relays. Can you imagine? The small little island,
The
21
World what?
the World Relays.
As in
where-
the track and field.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so the United States qualified on our soil. I think there were like 7 countries, I might be
Okay.
wrong, that qualified for the Olympics right here on Bahamian soil. So we, because the weather is kind of good for it.
Yeah,
so we,
yeah.
And then flights, because we're so close to the United States,
Right.
it's easier to access our island. So we do have some development beyond tourism, but I don't think that there's enough.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think is going to take more of a beyond the government. I think in this country we rely too heavily on the government. So I would like, for instance, this podcast I'm sure is going to go around the world. I would like the diaspora, those who are in the Bahamas, who are from the Bahamas, who have roots in the Bahamas, to think of kind of giving back. How do I now give back to a country that kind of gave me my foundation? That helped me. If you are a Black person in the Bahamas, you didn't grow up feeling Black. You didn't grow up for a second feeling that I couldn't.
Right.
So if you go beyond our shores and you are succeeding, because that actually does happen with Bahamians, think of giving back.
I think throughout the Caribbean.
Yes,
too, right?
you are. No, you are correct. It is throughout the Caribbean. Do you know who was the first Academy Award winner, Black person in the United States of America?
Sidney Poitier.
Guess where Sidney Poitier is from? From the
Okay.
Bahamas.
I actually didn't know that.
A lot of people did.
I did not know that.
A lot of people don't know
or maybe
that.
I think it was mentioned, but it maybe slipped my mind. But yeah,
He wasn't born here.
I think I knew he was like his heritage wasn't
Absolutely.
American, but I didn't know where.
It was.
So which
it was
island?
the Bahamas, Cat Island, and
okay.
so his foundation was laid in a country where, because of the color of his skin, he wasn't told he couldn't.
Right.
And I think if you read his autobiography, I've heard some of the stories he tells of going, for instance, to Florida for the first time and being treated like, he went. There's a story of him going to deliver something to a home of a white person, and they told him all delivery is done in the back. He went to the front door because you're born in a country where you don't think, you just go and you deliver it to the front door. And that kind of was an experience. That's kind of apparently, and I hope I'm telling the story correctly, but apparently they feared for Sidney's life because the Ku Klux Klan was organizing against him. Who is this Black person?
So where was
he thinks this happened in Florida?
Okay. And where in Florida was he?
Now, I think it's Miami again. I don't want to misquote it. If we have someone who can Google that right now. But I do know the incident happened, and he ended up in New York because his family feared for his life, and so they sent him to New York, and that's where his love of acting and all the rest of that was actually born. I'm learning how to read and all the rest of it, and I love to see Sidney on the big screen. And he was very intentional though about the roles he played.
Guess who's coming to dinner is my
Yes,
personal
he did
favorite.
not want to play those traditional Black roles.
Yeah.
Because remember, you're from a country where you don't think Black.
Yeah.
You just think that you're a person who can.
Yeah.
Do you know, Brian, the first time I felt that someone was reacting to me because I was Black was in New England. I went on a retreat. I was 20-something. I had taught for 1 year, and I went on a retreat, a Christian counseling retreat it was called. And I remember going to this food store and resting my stuff on this counter. This little old white lady took up her stuff and looked at me in a particular way, and I knew she was reacting to me because I was Black. And I had some American white friends who were there with me. And when we went back, they were so scared. They were afraid that I was going to react to the way, because they knew it. Everybody just knew instinctively that she was reacting to me because of the color of my skin. But I grew up in a country where being Black was never a thing. Because my prime minister was Black. Most of my teachers were Black. The doctors, the lawyers, they were Black. So I didn't even think about it.
I joke with people that I figured out I was Black in America, and I had to learn to be Black in America.
Yeah,
I mean, and I don't mean that, obviously I knew I was Black, but
I understand.
It wasn't the thing, it wasn't the first thing that I was made aware of in any situation I was in, like 99% of the times. And so then your in-group, like my in-group was being Trinidadian, right? And that was the thing that really was first and foremost in my mind of how I would think of myself. And then I moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 1999. And all of a sudden, I'm in a whole different context, right? And at 44, I now have the words to put to what I was experiencing.
Right.
But, at the time, when I had too many incidents, like what you just described, and I remember the feeling that I had was confusion. Like, why are you, like, what?
It's exactly what I felt.
It's one thing to read it in a textbook. It's another thing to just actually have it play out in real time.
Right.
But the other side to that, though, and I think this is the point you're making earlier about the need for people who have gone abroad to kind of come and give back, is when I talk about inclusive classrooms and education as a possibility and all of this stuff, I am actually speaking about that not just from an intellectual standpoint, but from a, I know what it feels like to just go to a classroom and be excited to do that work.
Yep.
Right? And not
Same here.
feel like if I belong, not, worried if this campus only has, 10% people of color, wonder how they will see you. Like none of that. Right?
Absolutely. I'm there with you.
And like I know exactly that feeling. And so when I'm trying to encourage people to think about their teaching, whatever context it is, across the United States in particular, is that's where you want to be. That's how you want to, and it's not every teacher can kind of re-transform American society by themselves to make that environment happen. But that's the goal we should be aspiring towards, right?
I absolutely.
And
No,
having that
I agree with
background
you.
it's huge.
I agree with you. I actually I started my, got an associate's from the College of the Bahamas, and I got my bachelor's degree at Barry University.
Miami,
And
Florida, yeah.
I loved it. I loved
Miami
the
Shores.
the experience there. It's in Miami Shores, Florida. And like you said, it's almost as if people want me to think that I'm Black. And they try to say things, 'cause even some of my professors try to say things to make me aware of my Blackness. But up here, it was like, okay, and okay, and I know I'm Black, but okay, and
Right.
because by the time I went off to the United States, and you hear a lot about the racial tensions that's there, my identity was intact. I wasn't
Right.
Black. I was just a Bahamian. I was female. I'm a born again believer. I'm a teacher. I'm passionate about education, because when I went to do my degree in math, I had already taught for 6 years.
Okay, I was about to ask
So
you
that
yeah.
actually brought a wealth of. I was an older student.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
taught for 6 years here first, and I needed 2 years to complete my master's degree. So I was an older student. I was, I think, must have been 24 at the time, or 26 maybe. I think it was 26 or 27 at the
Our
time.
producer say gave us 23. He's like, older? What?
I was an older student. But because my identity was intact and all the rest of it, I was not, okay, I hear what you're saying, that I'm Black, but okay, and I'm here for an education, because
Right.
I'm looking forward to going back home and
Right.
sowing more into those students. So I agree with you, even to the extent that when we think of education, as educators in particular, we need to get beyond the whole color thing. We have to stop seeing students as colors or race or even religion. We have to see students as opportunities. And that's it. That's it for me. Every child who's in front of me, I believe I've been gifted with an opportunity to sow something into this person, to let them know that, yeah, like I said, the 3 R's are important, but there's life beyond the 3 R's. And to instill, and even with my kids, I do the very same thing, is to instill that the things that are really going to matter 10 years from now, nobody's going to care if you got an A
Right.
on your transcript.
right.
A's are important,
Yeah,
but
it's not to
C's
dismiss
get
it, right.
degrees.
Yeah, right.
Something I learned recently, that C's get degrees as well. You know, a doctor who's operating on you, he might have gotten a C in this very same technique
right.
that he's doing. So the things that are going to carry you are the soft skills. Beyond, and so as an educator, I was happy that I understood that very early on. I don't know where it came from. So I was happy I understood that. And I believe that some of my students are better for the fact that it wasn't just about those A's and B's, or not to get the F,
Yeah.
but it's about the things that are going to make you more successful and more productive for your family, for your society, for your neighborhood, and all the rest of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. So so my program is beginning hopefully a long, fruitful partnership with the Ministry of Education to
Yes,
look at some aspects of the marine curriculum led by the future Dr. Aaron Johnson. So we're pretty excited about that. And I think one of the biggest aspects of this we've enjoyed, at least so far, is just getting to learn about how humanity unfolds in the classrooms here in Bahamas, across at least a couple islands for now. I'll get you out of here on this one. As we, enter into this project, into this partnership, and it's a curriculum development project, right? So what are some of the maybe main things you would hope, A, that we accomplish, but also B, that we learn as we hope to transform the way students are taught about the marine environment?
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, I've known you for how long? We've been together for 5 days. Feels longer, right?
I hope
but
that's a good thing.
but I want to compliment you. I mean, very sincerely, on the way you approached this. You and your team. You and
Thank you.
tech guy. I'm sure your audience know him.
Segev on my side.
Segev. But
Class
what
of
I loved
2025.
about it is you both came to this country and you made no assumptions. You asked questions. You came to learn, to listen, to grow, and you did well with pivoting. And I said to you earlier today is that you listened. And I noticed that you didn't just listen so that you got your chance to speak. We talked about that, but I felt as if you listened so that you can have intelligent and meaningful conversations. So I appreciate that about you, and I want to thank you for that. I watched you in Abaco among the most of them are expats in Abaco, right? So I watch you among them, and your comfort level. Then I watch you among here in New Providence. Nassau is the capital. New Providence is the island. Just saying.
Yes.
But I watched you among the educators in New Providence as well, in that same sense of I am here to listen and to learn. I'm going to give some pushback. I'm going to ask my questions, but it wasn't canned. So I appreciated that. What I want to see from this project is Bahamians understanding the wealth
Right.
of resources we have right here in this country. That we don't have to go far and wide, because guess what's happening, Brian? And friends and I always say this, only the Bahamians don't want to be in the Bahamas because everybody else wants to be in the Bahamas. So I think this gives an opportunity for locals, children
Yeah.
who are in the schooling systems, because we're doing in both the private and the public schools, and that's so important
Right.
to understand that we have a wealth of knowledge right here in this country. And I would say that, because I know your podcast is beyond the Bahamas, but I would say that to wherever this podcast
Yeah.
is heard, that learn the resource, learn what's unique
Yeah.
and good about where you live. You're there for a purpose.
Yeah,
You were
yeah,
placed
yeah.
there for a purpose. And there's some good things happening right there,
Right.
right under your nose.
Right.
So I'm hoping that what you're doing is we're surrounded by water. 700 islands, rocks, and keys surrounded by water. Why doesn't every Bahamian know how to swim? Why doesn't every Bahamian understand about the mangroves and the beautiful ecosystems? People come to this country just to
Spend
go scuba diving.
High top money to
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
I had a friend who came here. He worked for the U.S. Embassy, and we developed a friendship. And when he left, he would say to me, Kim, you live on an exotic island, right? Never thought about it that
Right,
way.
right.
Just complaining
Yeah,
about
it was just home. It was just
yeah,
home.
it was just
Right, it was
home,
just home. Yeah,
complaining
yeah.
about the government is doing this, and it's like, you know what, you're right. But what I've learned is that wherever you are in the world, there's something special about where you're from. We just got to take the time to notice.
Yeah.
Stop complaining about what the government is or isn't
Yeah.
doing. That's one of the things I need to stop doing, and just kind of take a moment to notice. And I
Yeah.
want to talk to educators as well, and just encourage us that we have such a gift when those students are in front of us. And I really believe that we have such an opportunity. They say those who can do and those who can't teach. You've heard that
Yeah.
before.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, I have.
I think
And
those.
I've seen it like operationalized and how people treat teachers as well, which is sad.
That is actually unfortunate, but I believe that I know we'd like to see it in our paychecks, because we're the ones who teach the doctors and we
Right.
teach the lawyers
Right.
and all the rest of it. But I do believe that we have a unique opportunity as teachers. We have gifts in front of us that we can mold and not make it about what the culture is saying, but making it about understand what is it that I can impart to the student that's going to help him to be more productive.
Right.
Yeah, you need to get the curriculum down. That's what they pay us for.
Right.
But we also get kind of life-changing opportunities as well. As a teacher, I never went into the staff room during the break and lunch times. You know where I was?
Where?
I was in my classroom
Yeah.
talking to my students.
Yeah. It was
And it's not as if I didn't want to hang out with my colleagues,
right.
but I wanted to use the opportunities as well, just to sow as much as I could into my students.
Okay.
I'm grateful for my 10 years.
Yeah.
And I miss it.
I feel I could wave a magic wand and get you back in there, but like you said earlier, education happens everywhere, and
Yes.
you're called to do that work in different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be classroom. I just want to say thank you for just being so welcoming, allowing our team to come here and learn and just continue to be in community with the teachers here, and just really looking forward to that partnership going forward. And thanks for spending an hour with us on Knowledge Unbound.
Well, I love it, and I'm looking forward to getting my knowledge unbound tea mug. You guys can.
Yeah, apparently our
I
guest-
love tea. That's the British. That's the British in me. I don't mind coffee, but I love tea. So I look forward to
Our
receiving
guest
my.
is making some merchandise suggestions. Good
Yes,
job,
so
man.
I look forward to receiving my mug in the mail.
Kimberly Minors, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Plant seeds, work feed. Well, enough of them want really born when the food gone so long.
Knowledge Unbound is brought to you by the Rios Institute for Racially Just, Inclusive, Open STEM Education. We are generously funded by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Knowledge Unbound is produced, as always, by Mr. Sega Famazai.
And we're still going global.
And we are still going global. Well, speaking of going global, how was the Bahamas when we filmed this live? How was that? I know the answer, but I want the audience to know how nice it was being there doing this.
As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, coming back to the islands after quite a bit of time, it definitely felt refreshing. It kind of felt like home, away from home. Not mentioning the fact that there are several Haitians that have moved to the Bahamas. And I did overhear a couple of them speaking Creole, so I was like, yeah, definitely home away from home.
You could just stay, nobody would even notice, right? Like just
the same way that I stay, the same way that I just enter all these spaces, and I hear someone mention that they're Haitian, and
yeah.
when the time is right, I
code
drop
switch.
in the Creole,
The code switch, yeah.
and then mind blown. It
Yeah.
happened to me pretty recently. Come to think of it.
Well, I like the fact. So in this episode, Kim talked a lot about teachers and who teaches. She mentioned the fact that they import a lot of teachers. One of the things that was really special when we visited the Bahamas, especially in Nassau, was meeting the teachers themselves and meeting the people from the ministry, and so it just gave some additional context to what she was saying when they were telling me their story and what they think about when they show up to their classroom. And it reminds me, my mom always says this to me all the time about, Brian, no matter where you go, no matter what people's culture is, currency is, station in life, people are people. And everywhere around the planet, everyone's getting up to go and do their thing, to feed their children, to hopefully do good. And I think maybe for me, that's the takeaway, right? Like, to the extent our going global nature of this podcast, I hope people hearing the story of education in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and hearing some similarities in how people think about it, but also things we could learn from. I hope that resonates with you this week. Thank you so much as always for listening, and please be excellent to each other.
Parent, and again, one of the things that really saddened me in the Bahamas public school is we couldn't get parents to take ownership of their children's education. So I would love to see a program for parents that say, listen, you are responsible for your child's education, and make sure you're more engaged. Make sure you're more engaged in what's happening in the schools. Make sure it supports the values that you want your children to know. So a class for parents as your child's first educator, I would love to see that. I believe that, I know we'd like to see it in our paychecks, because we're the ones who teach the doctors and we teach the lawyers and all the rest of it. But I do believe that we have a unique opportunity as teachers where we have gifts in front of us that we can mold and not make it about what the culture is saying, but making it about understand what is it that I can impart to the student that's going to help him to be more productive. You need to get the curriculum down, that's what they pay us for, but we also get kind of life-changing opportunities as well.
The world is that turn, so me know that the sun will go rise again one day. I go reach higher heights, even if now it feels like I'm falling. All of me goodness and glory abide by my side, yeah. Knock it, come in, knock we till the work done. We not lose a man, a winner, and that's for certain.